Segment 2, Golden Black Live. Brian Newbert is with me, and Kyle is off arguing with Stacy probably in the back room. And then we'll have segment 3 will be Stacy and Pete Quinn will join us. We'll talk a little bit about Purdue football ticket sales. Lots of questions today, which is good. We appreciate that very much. We're hoping that Jerry Palm is going to call us because he was going to give us a little bit of a breakdown on his view of the bubble. And Brian, I know you've done a lot of research on one thing I wanted you to go back and repeat about the bad losses. And by the definition of bad loss is the team outside of the top 100. And you're saying Xavier, of the three, Xavier, Miami, and Purdue are the three of the bubble teams that have the most bad losses.
When you look at teams that are generally perceived to be on the bubble, I broke down a bunch of them in terms of bad losses. Bad loss defined as anybody outside the top 100 in the RPI. There's still some moving parts there because teams can win or lose and fall in and out of the top 100. Miami's got 4 bad losses. Xavier's got 4 bad losses. Purdue has 3 bad losses. Vanderbilt, North Florida, Gardner-Webb. The Kansas State win over Kansas helped Purdue because it moved Kansas State into the top 100. They're now number 90.
Right.
So not only are they in the top 100, they're relatively comfortably in the top 100. But when you look at a lot of the other teams out there generally perceived to be on the bubble, Purdue's got as many bad losses as most other people do. BYU has 3, and that's not necessarily good news for Purdue. Because if BYU didn't have those 3 bad losses, they might be a top 50 RPI team, and that would be a really good win for Purdue. But Oregon 1, Texas 0, St. John's 2, Texas 0, Oregon 1, Georgia 2, Illinois 1, Iowa 1 in terms of bad losses. LSU has 3, Stanford has 3. But, as we've been saying all along, Purdue's got some things to overcome from its non-conference schedule, fair or not. Obviously, Purdue's playing like an entirely different team than it did then, but the entire body of work matters. And there's been some emphasis put on not weighting games so much in terms of when they happen or the circumstances. Yeah. Now, obviously, when the human element comes into play, I've said the term human element about 10,000 times in the last 2 weeks.
And that's reality,
the human element, when it comes into play, and the committee has to sit down and say, okay, between this team and this team, who's playing better right now? Purdue's going to get the nod over almost anybody out there because of the way they've played for the last 6 weeks. But at the same time, your body of work matters more, and Purdue's still got some work to do with its body of work.
Yeah, we got questions. Somebody's now jumped onto this Milwaukee players from Milwaukee, women's basketball players from Milwaukee. I'm drawn. I know they've had a couple. They've had Jill Sauer back in the '80s, but she wasn't from Milwaukee. But you're stretching my knowledge there more than I can help with. Basil Smotherman certainly was huge last night. You just love the fact that when he runs the court and gets to the rim, he is something to watch. And he also did hit a 3 yesterday. And this is a question that we've had a couple of these questions, and I don't know if there's any good answers because how do you get him more minutes? Well, I guess the way you get him more minutes is if Vince Edwards isn't available. This team seems to be a pretty together group, seems to be all pretty much on the same page. It will be interesting to see how those minutes. It seems like Matt Painter has the ability to go with literally who's hot, who's getting the job done in any particular game, though.
Yeah, Edwards is so important in what they do offensively. I think it's really important for Purdue to have him out there. So in terms of when all things are equal, when Vince Edwards is playing well and Basil Smotherman is playing well, I think that they're probably going to be more prone to have Vince Edwards out there just because of the versatility and the decision making and the passing. And just the ability to create offensive matchups and whatnot. And he's a better rebounder.
Yeah.
But when Basil Smotherman's playing playing with energy,
Yeah.
It was a long night last night.
Yeah.
When Basil Smotherman's playing with energy, and he's shown this his entire career, he can be very good. He can be a very, very productive player. You saw that last night. He was incredibly efficient. He was all over the place from an energy standpoint. He makes that play where he intercepts an inbound pass, throws it off of Rutgers. That was a big possession.
Yeah, no doubt.
Purdue got. And, just the fact that he was able to be active around the rim, choose his spots with his jump shot. I just thought it was a really good overall game from Basil Smotherman. If you get both of those guys playing well at the same time, you have a really good problem on your hands.
Yeah, no
because I think Basil Smotherman does things that Vince Edwards doesn't. Vince Edwards does things that Basil Smotherman obviously doesn't. One is a much better athlete than the other. I think one is a better offensive player. One can be a better defensive player. I said last night before the game, it's conceivable that Purdue could be a better defensive team with Smotherman out there instead of Vince Edwards because Edwards isn't where he's going to be defensively quite yet. And Purdue promptly gives up 85 points to Rutgers. So it shows you what I know.
Yeah.
But Basil Smotherman
Very
played very
strange
well
game
last night.
scoring wise though last night, and I don't know, and I can't even remember what went on a half hour ago, but you did the data on what Rutgers has scored, and it's in the last 6 minutes in its 2 games against Purdue. The numbers are pretty astounding in terms of the percentage of its points. Remember, Rutgers was sitting at about 28 points in the game, and Piscataway was 6 minutes to go, and ended up with what 51 in that loss at 10.
In the final, they scored 45% of their points in the final 6 minutes.
In the game at Piscataway.
Last night, I don't even remember. I don't want to be wrong, so I'm going to keep my mouth shut.
All right. You have the situation too. We have another question from Boiler Nut, and this is this might be Kyle Charters. I don't know, and drag. I don't know. That's a bad thing to say. But is there ever been a bracket prediction before the actual bracket that was very accurate? We argue about this in the office. I'm impressed that Joe Lunardi, I think, has only missed 7 teams in 9 years, or something like that. I know that Kyle, and I'm only speaking of that now because he can't be here to defend himself, the fact that he says a lot of people could make those predictions that well. Yeah. It is interesting in terms of it does boil down to a pretty finite group of teams when it all comes down to the final stretch.
Yeah, when it comes right down to it, at the end of the day, some things really kind of become apparent as to who's in and who's out, and it just becomes a matter of picking the right 7 teams out of 10 teams or something like that, or picking the seeding. Yeah. The seeding is the bigger challenge than who's actually in the field for the most part. But just sort of one thing I want to underscore, it seems like bracketologists are taking a world of crap from people these days.
Yeah.
They don't hate your school. They're just looking at what your school has done and assessing the situation. It just seems like people are attacking, Jerry Palm and
that's why Jerry hasn't shown up yet.
Because they're saying that it's conceivable Purdue might not make the NCAA tournament. Purdue might not make the NCAA tournament. That is reality. I mean, when you look at the numbers, when you look at the losses, when you look at the body of work, Purdue's got 1 foot in, 1 foot out right now. And the story of its season has not been told yet because Purdue's got big games left. So, yes, it's all a projection right now and moving part, but that's part of the entertainment. Nobody out here is bashing Purdue, hating Purdue because they're saying Purdue's on the bubble.
Yeah, Jerry Palm's a pretty guy.
Purdue's on the bubble.
Yeah.
Purdue lost 3 bad games in non-conference, 4 bad games when you look at Kansas State too, and it's just reality. And I'm going to shut up now because we have Jerry now.
All right, Jerry, you there?
Hi, I am here,
Jerry?
And I should clarify that I do hate your school.
Yeah. All right, but that would be a difficult thing for you to say. I know that you are. As Brian just said, you guys are taking a raft of stuff, so to speak, and we've got about 4 or 5 minutes with you. But Jerry, where is Purdue in your estimation right now? Is Brian says 1 foot in, 1 foot out? How do you view it?
Yeah, pretty much. 1 foot a little bit more in than out at this point in time. But that's the thing that fans need to realize is what you do in the conference doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
It's only part of who you are, and you're judged on the whole, not the part. So the fact that Purdue's in second place in the conference right now, the committee doesn't even have where you are in your conference on their team sheet. Your conference record, not even part of their data. You're judged on, your entire season, and you can make or break your tournament chances in November and December as easily as you can in January or February. And Purdue broke them in November and December, and they are now trying to make them in January and February, and doing a pretty good job of trying to make them. But there's still work to do. The schedule down the stretch here, at Ohio State, at Michigan State, home Illinois. That home Illinois game is going to be crucial because Illinois is kind of in the same position. And if they could get one of the road games, I would say most likely Michigan State seems to be the more winnable game. Then they can feel pretty good entering the conference tournament. But if they lose all 3 of them, I don't even know if there's anything they can do in the conference tournament except win it. It might be, that dire by then. It's, when you lose to North Florida at home, when you lose to Gardner-Webb at home, you basically need 1.5 to 2 more conference wins than you thought you did to make up for that. And that's simply how it is.
Yeah.
Jerry, I've used the word in the last couple of weeks, human element, or term human element, probably 1,000 times. How much does that come into consideration for the NCAA committee? Potentially not in terms of who's in the field, but in terms of if you have to differentiate one school from another, how does the way a school is playing at the time or has played in the past, let's say hypothetically 6 weeks, how much does that come into consideration?
Well, first of all, it's a subjective process guided by objective data. But the committee has made a commitment to not emphasizing how a team is playing now or at the end of the year. There used to be part of the criteria was how you finished in your last 12 games. That's been gone for several years because they want every game, the date of the game, to be irrelevant. So how you are playing now is not a factor. And so, but they hold themselves accountable. They hold each other accountable for that sort of a thing. So Purdue's playing really well now. Purdue had to play really well now in order to make up for what they had done before.
Yeah, that makes sense in terms of where things have been from that standpoint.
So, in your assessment, and I'm potentially putting you on the spot here off the top of your head, who should Purdue fans be rooting for? Who should they be rooting against?
Well, I have at CBSSports.com a bubble list of about 16 teams that Purdue should be rooting against. Illinois would be included among those teams. Temple, A&M, Colorado State, Dayton, Davidson, Pittsburgh, UCLA, Stanford. There's a whole bunch of teams. North Carolina State, maybe a little bit less rooting against them because that's one of Purdue's better wins, and easily their best non-conference win. But that's also a team they're competing with at the bottom of the bracket. So you kind of want that to look like a good win, but not too good. But it's if they were both fighting for one spot, the win at home could be helpful. But Purdue just got to take care of their own business. I mean, rooting for the teams at at the bottom of the bracket, rooting against those teams, I mean, is nice, but better to just take care of it yourself.
In this year, is this any different than it's been? I mean, do you see is this crazier than usual, or has it been about the same? You've been doing this for a while. How do you view the 2015 field?
It's about the same. The bubble's about the same since they went to 68 teams. It obviously was going to get softer when you add 3 more teams to the field. For those final 3 spots, you have about 10 teams that all look the same, one way or another. I always say, equally unworthy. But it's not any different now than it was last year, the year before, or ever since they went to 68. It's the same. I mean, with some differences. I mean, Purdue's profile is unique. You don't see a lot of teams like Purdue where the light went on in the middle of the season, and they went from being mediocre to pretty darn good. I mean, usually that sort of development is slow, but for Purdue it was like overnight. And that's the kind of makes them unique and a bit of a challenge for the committee.
Yeah, no question on that. It'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. You will not sleep until when? How long?
I give up sleep for Lent. It's a tradition.
Yeah, yeah. There you go. Well, that's good. Then you don't have to worry about cookies and stuff like that. So, hey, Jerry, thanks so much for taking the time to call in. We always appreciate your information. We may be bugging you again the next couple of weeks as this gets closer to Selection Sunday. A lot of ground to be covered, certainly for Purdue and a lot of other teams.
Yeah, thanks. Anytime. It's nice to be talking about the Boilers again.
Yeah, no question. No question from that standpoint. Okay, we're going to take a 2-minute break, bring Stacy Clarity in for segment 3. Pete Quinn will also be joining us as well. We'll talk a little Purdue football tickets, etc. In our final segment on Gold and Black Live.